So I would like to welcome everyone to today's lived experience webinar. So this webinar is titled Practical Tips for Living Well with Memory Loss. So my name is Kim McKercher, and I am a provincial coordinator with the Alzheimer's Society of BC, and I'll be your host for the webinar this afternoon. Okay, so at this time, it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speakers today. So first, I would like to introduce Dr. Jim Mann. So Jim is a retired marketing and communications professional from Surrey, BC, who has been a longtime supporter and volunteer with the Alzheimer's Society of BC. He currently sits on our board of directors and the Alzheimer's Society's Committee for Meaningful Engagement of People with Lived Experience. Jim was first diagnosed with young onset dementia at the age of 58 and has been on a mission to make life better for others affected by dementia ever since. The University of British Columbia recognized Jim as the most influential person in Canada in countering stereotypes and building a more inclusive society for people living with dementia, awarding him an honorary Doctor of Laws degree. So thank you so much, Jim, for being here today. And next, it's my pleasure to introduce Myrna Norman. So Myrna is a published author. She has served many years as a member of the Alzheimer's Society of BC's leadership group, is a passionate dementia advocate, and a vital part of the Society's new Lived Experience Partner Program. Myrna volunteers with the Purple Angel Dementia Support Program in Maple Ridge, BC, and has been recognized as a community champion by the City of Maple Ridge. So welcome, Myrna. And then last, but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce Tobias Gesso. So Tobias is a retired technology consultant with a master's degree in computer science and a lengthy career spanning over 4 decades. He is especially fond of his work for Triumph, Canada's particle physics laboratory. Beyond his professional achievements, he is a devoted husband and father. Tobias and his wife, Marcia, have navigated the challenges of life together, including Marcia's cognitive decline. So he approaches this journey with love and patience. Tobias has stated that Marcia teaches me as much now as ever, and the lessons, while hard, are infinitely rewarding. And I'd also like to mention that he is a Agapi, I think that's how you say it, a Newfoundland grandfather, and he has 3 accomplished adult children, a daughter and son who are technology consultants, and his youngest son who is a Grammy Award-winning songwriter. And fittingly, Tobias used AI to generate his bio today, and he's the perfect example that age does not have to be a barrier to technology. So thank you, Tobias, for being here. I would like to give a special welcome to each of our guest speakers today. Okay, so to start off our discussion, we would like to distinguish between age-associated memory loss versus the type of memory loss that someone living with dementia may experience. So you might ask yourself, will my memory get worse as I age? So that's a common question. The majority of people will continue to have strong memories as they get older. Their ability to remember will not decline rapidly, and they will retain the skills and knowledge learned throughout their lives. However, almost 40% of us will experience some form of memory loss after the age of 65. But this doesn't necessarily mean that we have dementia. So for the most part, memory loss for this group of people is mild enough that they can carry on their day-to-day lives without much interruption. So with age-associated memory loss, it does not noticeably disrupt your daily life. Your memory does not affect your ability to complete tasks that are part of your regular routine. You will have little difficulty learning and remembering new things, and you don't have an underlying medical condition causing memory changes. We consider age-associated memory loss as a normal or natural part of aging. But in 2024, 8.7% of people in Canada over the age of 65 will live with some form of dementia. And in between age-associated memory loss, or normal aging, and dementia is also a condition known as mild cognitive impairment, or MCI. So people living with MCI often experience memory loss and other symptoms such as changes to communication and disorientation, but their symptoms are not as severe as someone living with dementia. When living with dementia, memory loss is typically severe enough that it affects your daily life and can impact your ability to perform tasks. People living with dementia, often find it hard to learn new skills and retain new information. So I want to note that symptoms of dementia go beyond memory loss, but today that will be the primary focus of our discussion. And so I'm going to bring down the sharing of the screen now and ask my first question to you, Jim. Um, Jim, if you don't mind, can you help us better understand how memory is commonly affected by Alzheimer's disease?
In so many ways, uh, Tim, that um, one of the first things I noticed was just in navigation and driving, um, forgetting how to get to a location while driving, forget where in fact I was really going. Um, I used to find ways to hide it, and I was fortunate, I guess, that my wife Alice really dislikes being in a traffic jam, if you will, or and so I would often ask her, "Well, which route would you like to take?" And so that was my solution to driving in somewhat fear. Um, but it it impacts more, certainly for me, the short-term memory. And with one example I can give is I will be on a number of Zoom calls at a meeting, and I will say something and offer a suggestion. And sometimes the researcher will say, you know, good idea or good thought. Can you expand on that? And I I often don't recall what, in fact, I've said. Um, and of course, I'm haven't written it down or anything. So rather than say I have no idea what I said, um, I I figure that by trying to respond, um, it will come to me. And so far, I think I've had relatively good success at that. But it is it certainly is you get this momentary panic. But everyone has so many experiences of how they are impacted by memory. And so I certainly am going to look forward to hearing from Myrna and Tobias, because it can be one of those very, very frustrating things. I know that will I will think, oh, I really want to look whatever it is up, and I know I've got a piece of paper about it, and so then I start, looking to where I think it should be, and it isn't, and then I look in this place and that place, and I can spend a lot of time looking around my desk in my office for something that I really think I do have, but I'm not sure that I would even recognize it necessarily. And may have a pile of stuff to read, and I'll go through everything there, and I'll lift up things on my desk, and I'll look around and go in different files, and sometimes I do find it where it should be, um, but usually where it should be is the last place I'll look. And but it can be it can be really gut-wrenching to sit there and think, you know what? I think I had it yesterday, and now I have no memory of what I did with it or where I might have put it. Um, and I don't know. I guess I feel for what I do the the desire to look um, organized and things like things like that can just make me a bit unhappy. So
Thank you for sharing your real life experiences
yeah,
with us and how memory changes impact you. We do hear very frequently, often in our early stage support groups, how frustrating misplacing things and dealing with memory loss on a day-to-day basis can be. And I appreciate you sharing your insights there. And Myrna, I'd like to ask you a similar question. If you could share a little bit about how changes to your memory have impacted your daily life.
Wow. As I was listening to Jim talk, I was taking every one of those steps with you, Jim. And you walk back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And part of you knows you're not going to find it. But the other part of you says, but I need to find it. I know it was here. And so it does. Someone once said, and I think her name was Dorothy, that we can be right or we can be happy. And so for the most, I try and I know I'm getting frustrated and angry, so I try and find a funny part to it so I can let it go. But but during the process, it's really, really, we've got jerks in our head that tell us lots of things that we shouldn't listen to, and we have to remember that that's not who we are. Um, I really appreciated all that you had to say, Jim, and I know it's difficult to say those things, and that's really wonderful that you could share that with us. I've had lots of difficulties. I've had my driver's license taken away about 10 years ago because the doctor felt that I wasn't capable of driving. Um, and those sort of personal losses in our lives can be really painful, not only for men, but also for women. Some of us really pride ourselves on our independence. And then when that's gone, it's really difficult. Um, uh, it's really interesting that you talked about MCI and you showed the graph. I've been doing support groups for people with lived experience, I don't know, maybe 8 years or something. And a lot of the people have been with me for a very long time. And I've noticed recently I go to say hi and the name is totally gone. And it's devastating. I find it the best way to deal with it is to say, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. And then they'll just give it to me. I think when you have a diagnosis that's painful mentally and emotionally, it's better just to be really honest. Jim, I had an incident like you were talking about where I was at a very prestigious meeting and I suggested something and they said, well, could you please tell us more about it? And the panic was, oh, it was terrible because I didn't even remember. So it's a really difficult thing, but we can choose. Somebody once told me about 5 or 6 years ago, you can choose to be happy or you can choose to be miserable. And so I switched because I was quite miserable before. I switched. And so now I'm generally a happier person, although the frustrations that Jim was talking about are real. Cooking is absolutely terrible. I plan and I buy all the special things with my husband to make a special dish, and then I can't even eat it myself. Like it's devastating. And so, as Jim knows, there's things we have to give up um, to maintain our own self-worth. And it's better to give them up, but we must be kept busy. It's not helpful to have to sit in a chair and watch TV. I'm sorry for rattling on, Kim.
No, we appreciate all of your insights. And I believe it was you who shared a tip on putting the oven mitt in the middle of the floor when cooking, and that reminded you that the oven was on. And that's something that has always stuck with me. And I know baking and cooking is something that's really been important for you and something you enjoy. And so I understand those frustrations as things change.
Yeah.
Thank you. Um, Tobias, and I'm going to direct this question to you around how memory loss has impacted your wife, Marcia, and if you can share some of the changes that you've noticed as her care partner.
Sure. Thank you, Myrna. It's a great segue when you bring up the stove, because that's probably the time that was most impactful for me to realize that things were going to be different now. And that is, I asked Marcia to go out and turn off an element on our gas stove. Would never buy gas again, by the way. Uh, and when she did, she was having some trouble. She called out, "I'm not sure what's happened." And I went out, and she had singed her clothing from her armpit up her arm with the gas stove. And fortunately, whatever that clothing was made of didn't just explode into flames. So I I was immediately taken with, she doesn't remember how to turn off the stove. That functional aspect that Jim brought up, and Myrna as well, really impacted me there. Because for the longest time, I maybe denial, but I didn't see it. You know, I have age-related decline. I don't mind admitting it. I say it all the time, at 69. And, you know, I forget names and things, and I kept denying the fact that my wife was any worse at remembering things than I was. But my sister-in-law, you know, sat me down. She was a former nurse, RCMP officer after that, and said, "There's something going on here that is not right." And my kids did the same at a little time later, after I got over the initial shock and realized, oh yeah, I think we need to go and visit somebody and find out what this is about. So that turning of the memory and how importantly the functional aspect of it was, you know, was really important to distinguish it from my normal sort of feeling about, you know, my memory and how I forget things and how she forgot things as well. So that was important. Um, she misplaces things, you know, as I heard Jim talk about, and that's fine. I think the big thing for me to learn in that experience of where's my purse or where's my wallet is certain things have value or are important, and so there's an emotional connection to those, and so therefore, you know, unlike some other things that if she forgot where they were, it wouldn't matter. Those things matter, and it becomes a little bit of a bone of, you know, that she keeps gnawing on about where's this and where's that. And so, you know, that part of memory was also a little different, where it's important that she find out what happened to something. You know, I don't remember where I put it, but I need to find it. And so that became a big part of our interactions for a while, is finding this and finding that. And a little later, we'll talk about some of the mechanisms I used to cope with that, to figure out how to do it. And then she has this memory thing about being hyper focused, which is really unusual. She'll get we have a little dog, a little Yorkie. She loves the little dog, and the dog has to be fed, but like not 10, 15 times a day. And so, you know, moderating her helpfulness and wanting to do something, but forgetting that she'd already done it was also something that I noticed in the functional sphere, you know, that was a little different than just normal age-related memory decline, which I'm perfectly familiar with myself. So those are a couple of examples of where, you know, I didn't see it. Other people could see that it was a little different than age-related. Then when I started looking harder, and then bigger things started to happen over time, it became quite clear, you know, that this is a different type of memory issue than I was used to in my own life, and what I experience from day to day.
Thank you very much, Tobias, for sharing that. So, kind of what stands out from from each of our guests is that there is frustration associated with memory loss, and it can impact our day-to-day functioning and how we move and live and learn in our world and in our environment. And so we wanted to focus the next part of our discussion on sharing some practical strategies and things that each of our speakers do to help cope and live as well as possible with memory changes. And so I do want to also pose a question for those of you tuning in today. If you would feel comfortable doing so, please share in the chat box one strategy that has been most effective in your home or any change or adaptation that you've done to cope with memory changes. We'd love to hear from you. And at the end of this section, I'll come back and look at the chat box responses. So Myrna, I'm going to open the discussion to you first. If you don't mind sharing some practical tips and strategies that you have found helpful.
Oh, I'd love to. Excuse me. We have a walk-in tub that we got last year, and it has been so beneficial because I really enjoy a bath, but I don't enjoy a shower because it's cold in there. I'm sort of one of the typical people that don't want to have a shower because it's cold and the room is white and it's not all warm and fuzzy. And this walk-in tub, I literally can walk in and I can choose to sit down and have a shower, or I can fill it up and put the jets on and have a long bath. I'm not allowed to have it unless my husband's at home. And that's fine. The other thing that's really important in our home is decluttering. It's really hard for me to maintain housekeeping with a lot of stuff and things, and also for my husband to help out. And I'm really busy traveling across Canada, and so it needs to be something that I can feel good about managing. The other thing I wanted to say that is really important is when Dave is my husband, of course, and when he's talking to me, I need to see his face. If he's turned or talking in it from a different room to me, I don't hear him, and so that can sometimes cause arguments or because I'm not hearing what he perhaps is requesting, or he's not hearing me, I might get short with him. So making sure we're looking at the person that we're talking to is really, really important. And keeping the person with dementia busy. It's really difficult to go from a very busy life to sedentary. It's not good for us. We need to be, nature really does nurture. We need to do those things. And I'll wait to hear from the gentlemen as to what tips they have.
Thank you so much, Myrna. Tobias, do you have any practical tips that you can share with fellow care partners who are supporting a family member or someone in their life who is experiencing memory loss?
Well, something we did very recently, but something that I learned here in one of the seminars was to do a memory book. And so my daughter scanned 5,000 photos, and my eldest son, basically categorized things, and then my youngest actually produced the book, and it was really immediately a hit with my wife. She spent some, and part of the issue for the caregiver is keeping my wife busy doing things so that she doesn't get bored. Boredom it's a killer. It just doesn't go well when she doesn't have something to occupy her time. She gets emotional and upset and feels ignored or what have you. So, the memory book is a great activity that she can dive into and does so many times a day. So it's a very helpful strategy, both for the memory aspect of remembering people and looking at photos, and that memory and emotion part of it is stuck in that book everywhere. And so she gets to feel that and be entertained by it and also occupied. I try to avoid correcting anything around memory or doing, because I find that it's an emotional thing for her to recognize that that there are problems she's having with memory. So I had to be, I had to learn patience for the first time in our 42-year marriage, and it wasn't an easy task for me because I wasn't a very patient person, but I think I'm developing much more patience as we move forward to be able to, quietly and easily encourage her to get at what she's trying to remember. So you see the frustration and want to encourage her to remember as much as she can. And so, I rethink things with her and rephrase them and see if we can get at, what it is that she's trying to remember. My sanity, especially on lost things, as I mentioned before, with purses and wallets and things of importance, and including my wife herself with tags, air tags, and tiles and other devices where, if I want to find that purse, I can find it within, 30 seconds because I just pull up my phone and find a purse, go find a purse. Routine is really key for memory. I think it helps her, know what things are happening if we keep a fairly good routine about things. I gently guide if I can as a caregiver. Uh, Most of this is oriented to how to help somebody with memory decline. Simple choices, is it this or is it that? And I try to let her do the things that she feels she can do without correcting her. I love to cook, so it didn't matter that she didn't feel successful about cooking. I could take that over easily. And so there are a number of things where she led in the past, but I lead now, and it works out fine in our relationship. And I needed to learn how to moderate my emotions because one thing that will destroy memory fairly quickly is getting upset. There's just no no remembering anything when all you're seeing is anger or upset. So it helps with Marcia if there's something that needs to be done and she's getting frustrated to moderate, calm, and look at things and take over where I can to help figure things out. And then for me, in order to do that, I have to have some resilience. So I needed outside help with, talking to a psychologist, getting some respite care, looking after my own physical well-being and my emotional and intellectual well-being as well. And when you're tied to the hip, as the caregiver is, it gets very difficult to find that time for yourself. And so you do need to be vigilant about that and work on that, fairly assiduously. I go to a men's group, and as a caregiver, it was a godsend. Psychologists were great. He was fine. I enjoyed that time. Just 5 or 6 visits, and we got over some things with cognitive behavior therapy that helped me reframe things so that I wasn't looking at it in a negative way. But the men's group, they had all the range of early stages to very late and after as well. And so, everything came up. So I could see a roadmap, the entire roadmap of all the phases and stages of progression, which is really helpful to me because I do notice things and it pops into my head. Oh, I remember somebody talking about that at men's group. And so it helps me understand what's going on as well. So, and also the support from the guys is great. So I highly recommend getting out there if you're a caregiver, getting involved with a support group. And of course, all of these seminars and lectures. I'm a bit of a lifelong learner, so I enjoy this stuff anyway. But now it has some like real oomph meaning for me, so I enjoy it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. There were so many helpful tidbits in there that I think care partners can take away. And so much of easing frustration is about moderating our own response in these situations. And that was very insightful. Thank you. Um, Jim, when we were talking about this webinar topic, you shared with me a little bit about the importance of having a system in place to keep you organized. And I know that You are a part of a number of projects and want to continue to engage in research and advocacy. And I'd love to hear some of your tips for how you stay organized.
Sometimes I'm not sure that I have a tip to offer. I, I don't always feel the most organized, but um, I I agree with Tobias about the routine, that it can set the day. It sets the tone, um, and if there's something different, uh, perhaps at the start of the day, then it's not that it throws you as much as it requires more bandwidth, more brain power to, oh wow, I've now got to think in a whole different way and work things out. But um, for me, the big my big assistant is my Outlook calendar. I I use that a lot, um, and with and really appreciate the um, um, the alarm that you can set, and I have, and perhaps it's gone off while I have not been on mute. It sounds like a railroad car going through a tunnel, but I make it really loud in case I am, somewhere around a few people or whatever, and I will hear it, and um, it helps me set a day. It helps me plan in advance. Can I have a meeting on this particular day? And I know my limit within reason. I mean, there are times when I really don't, and I have 5 Zoom meetings in a day. But generally, it will help space things out, and that's the biggest um, I don't know biggest hint that I could pass along. Um, but um, contrary to the green initiative, and I rely on paper. I print basically. I won't say everything, um, but I print an awful lot, and I um, maintain a file for a particular meeting or a particular committee, and it's the only way that I can um, have some order in my life, and and having that will um, often remind me of what I need to bring up at the next meeting, or um, um, keep it really keeps me on track. I just actually I buy paper from Staples, and I don't buy individual packages. I buy a whole box, 2,500 pieces sheets of paper, and I'm good to go for a little while. Um, the big issue is not having an assistant to do my filing. Um, but one thing I learned no, many years ago when I was working, I wasn't always at head office, and I would have people phoning up and might say, "Well, you called me," and so you're left going, "I don't know, did I?" And so I have a special file that when I call somebody about something or when there is something outstanding, I put that in that file so that if somebody does call and say, well, you called me, I can look it up, or I refer to it periodically, and that way I can follow up with somebody. Um, it it certainly reduces the anxiety. Um, I also I like an email inbox to be empty. Doesn't happen a lot, but so I create folders and I file so much to the point that I've had a few people say, you should come and organize my emails, because they don't do that. But I could not operate. Excuse me, I need to have that reference and have everything grouped together. Um, but I think one thing that I I uh, I guess I want to respond to about, you mentioned in Myrna's, in your conversation with Myrna, the mention of the oven mitt. And there was a time a few years ago when my wife was uh, had to stay off her feet. She had broken a leg. And so she was upstairs and the kitchen is downstairs. So I thought, how am I going to make meals um, and stay safe and not burn the townhouse down? And so I thought, what I'll do is I will take a kitchen chair and I'll put it between the wall and the island, and that will stop me. I'll want to, if I am so inclined to leave the kitchen, it will stop me. And I don't know, I'll say it might have lasted 30 minutes or an hour, because it just got in the way. So I'd move it aside and I'd leave the kitchen. So, it's all well and good to have ideas in your mind about how little workarounds. But sometimes when you create a workaround, there's already a workaround around that workaround. So it adds a little levity to your life. That is for certain. But there are two things that I want to add, that I want people, I want to encourage people to not compare yourself to others as far as your journey of dementia. Um, because it is very easy to look at someone, a neighbor or Myrna, and say, look what they're doing, and I can't do that. And that's not being fair. That's not being fair to you, or it's not being fair to others. That we talk so much about, if you met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia, and that goes for everything. And so I really do want I really want to encourage people to just live a life that they're happy with, one that has purpose and meaning, but but don't look around you and say, well, they're doing so much more than me, and because that might well discourage you from trying something new. And the other thing is, we people with dementia are a creative bunch. I never thought of myself as being a creative person, but as we move forward along this path, we are creative. We create little ways, little workarounds. We create a way to do something. Wow, I used to be able to do that yesterday. I really like to do it. So how am I going to work? How am I going to make it work? And we often can come up with a solution. So I think we can sometimes sell ourselves short with not recognizing our own creativeness as we move forward with dementia.
Thank you for that important message, Jim. And I think just hearing from you all of the things you do behind the scenes to prepare for your meetings and your roles is really important for those living with dementia to see, because it isn't seamless. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and sometimes behind the scenes you're panicking too, and you've lost your train of thought, and being so open about that, I do think is really important and
There's
helpful.
no doubt about the panic.
Yeah. And I really do appreciate you sharing that with us, and also that there's no easy solution to coping with memory loss. And what works well for someone might not work well for another individual, and then what works well for a period of time may no longer work. And we always are adapting, and there's the problem solving piece, and very much a lot of creativity. So thank you. There is an incredible abundance of tips and strategies in the chat box. So thank all of you who are tuning in for sharing your own insights. And I'll read some of them out loud. And routine was number one. And I think everybody touched on the importance of finding routine and starting that is a building block for your day. Um, Gadgets like Google Nest that can have alarms or reminders similar to maybe the Outlook calendar, finding a way that you can use technology to be on your side. Whiteboards, very handy. Many people find that a good strategy. The air tags or different tracking devices on high value items or things that are really important or meaningful to an individual can ease a lot of frustration. Checklists for key things to do, like taking your meds or feeding the dog. An erasable calendar or whiteboard, absolutely. This is an interesting one, establishing what they call a wall of knowledge, where all of the important things that mom wants to remember are there, but also love notes and fun photos to keep it light. So I think that's a beautiful idea as well. Um, Sharing that for your sister, you post appointments on her iPhone with 2 reminders, and also call each morning to review the day's activities. Thank you for that one. Working with mom to find solutions to the problems and incorporate what she wants into the solution. Absolutely. I think that's so important to include the person living with dementia as much as possible. Um, Making sure you know how many pills are in a container so that you can monitor that and make sure that the medication has been taken each day. Having a place for things like keys or your wallet, having one place that you put it every day can be helpful. So in this situation, the son created a hook at eye level on the door frame. So that's where you look for your keys each day. Little post-it notes. I think post-it notes can be helpful, making them where they're visually accessible. So someone shared with me once that they put their reminders on their bathroom mirror because they know that's the place that they're going to look each day, and usually early on in the day. And so many really great tidbits in here, moving bills to automatic payment. Yeah, I don't think we'll go through all of them, but I hope you take a moment to look at the chat, and there's so many ideas that are shared. So thank you so much. Okay, so to move into kind of the final section of our webinar today, we're going to talk a little bit about things that you do to keep your brain active and support your overall well-being, because we talked a lot about memory loss being frustrating. And so, what do you do to stay well and active? And Tobias, I'm going to open it up to you first, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Uh, yeah, making sure that Marcia's engaged in something is really important, and I do see in the chat and things that keeping someone busy is critical. It feels as though Marcia has difficulty thinking of what she could do to entertain herself. So I have to be at least providing some help in that regard to get her started. So the memory book I mentioned, she can spend hours just leaping through that, and she's in control of and enjoying her time with it. Other things I do for myself as a caregiver, I need to keep myself active as well. I do crosswords and wordscapes and things, and I think I learned a new word recently called eumentia as opposed to dementia. And eumentia is keeping your mind active and growing and healthy. We all need to work on that. As we age, it's important to keep our minds active. And so anything that fits in those areas, like crosswords or wordscapes or learning things, or even playing a sport, is helpful to keeping my brain active, which also helps then my resilience and my ability to prompt and help Marcia with things that she enjoys doing as well. We both participate in what guided meditations together. I've discovered non-sleep deep rest. I have some trouble sleeping, so non-sleep deep rest is really important. And we enjoy, going through a 20-minute session together of guided meditation. That's really helpful to her. It's calming, and I think it also, she enjoys that process. Being open with friends so that we can engage them and help them understand what's happening so that they feel, there's no stigma, and that they can, say, yeah, sure, Marcia can come, and she's at book club right now with a group of women that she's had book club with for ages. They accept her. We do the book on Audible now rather than read it. How much of the book is retained, it doesn't matter. It keeps her busy. Audible, you can listen to it for a couple of hours and say, I've gotten through a book. And then working on sleep. Marcia sleeps like a log. She doesn't have any trouble sleeping, but I do have a little bit of trouble sleeping. So I have to work on that in order to be ready for the day and to be able to, get through the slings and arrows and things that are going to happen in a day, without losing my resilience or my ability to cope. And so I think all of that's important to increasing your memory as well. So if your loved one's having difficulty sleeping, I think that would be a priority. Like, how can we engage getting more sleep for the person affected, so that they can, that's a big one. I mean, I'm very forgetful if I'm tired. So I imagine that it just exacerbates any other symptoms that, for example, somebody living with dementia would have. So those are my sort of approaches to keeping my brain active, and then in kind helping Marcia and facilitating her brain to make sure that she's. I talk a lot, so she generally has like almost like a radio in the background all the time. So I think that's helpful for her. But I also try to be open about my feelings and things and engage her, as I always did, in the emotion of life. So she's really good at it. Like, she was very comforting. She'll switch immediately when she sees that I'm getting upset or emotional about something. She'll want to come over and, do that comforting thing. And I think that's really helpful for her to engage with that emotion, because it's a special kind of memory for her. And it doesn't disappear. So it's great.
Thank you. That was very beautifully said. Not to put you on the spot, but you've shared with me an example of how you stay physically active together through disc golf. Would you
Oh,
mind sharing that example? I think it's
so
a wonderful one.
I've written a little journal. I do a little bit of journaling too. That's helpful to me to see what's going on in the day and how I'm feeling. But you know, I picked up disc golf as a sport and really enjoyed it. And I wanted Marcia to come and enjoy it too, because it's an all ages, all abilities, all, you know, everything sport, and really easy to learn. But she didn't really like it, you know. So not to her taste. We have very different physical abilities in terms, I can throw a disc 300 feet. She has difficulty throwing it 90 feet. So, you know, there was and she's very competitive, so she doesn't like to lose. So we had to navigate that interest in that sport as well. So once she said, no, it's not really for me, and I still really love to play it and I wanted to go out, I devised a strategy of saying, well, I'll pay you $20 if you'll be my caddy and just hand me the discs and stuff. And of course, I'm not saying that, you know, it's a Scottish thing, but she's like 99% Scottish and she loves the money. Okay. So she loves to go and I get my game in. She has some fun. She makes $20. She's all happy, right? And then now I've actually got my friends wanting to pay her so that they can get me out, you see, to be their caddy. You see what I'm saying? So she's enjoying that part of it. So you have to be kind of open-minded and deal with, like, both of your pleasures are important, you know. And we do things like swimming and we tried lawn bowling and other things, but you know, you learn very quickly whether something's going to work or not with the person with dementia. So you know, those things sort themselves out. But once you have something that you enjoy, or either of you enjoy, you've got to try to find a way so that both of you can engage in it, and that I think is important. That compromise, I guess, is really important.
Yeah. I loved the way that you worked to find balance too, so that your needs were also being met, and you found it in a way for Marcia to enjoy um, coming with you. And yeah, just overall, I think helping everybody's well-being in that situation. And then there's also a social component now that your friends have asked her to caddy for them. And I think she has a dog sometimes with her too. Is
Oh,
that correct?
you bring
Yeah.
Skep
Yeah.
and yeah, we post them on the website and stuff. So yeah, it's all fun. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you. Really important message for care partners to keep yourself active and still find the joy in life as well. So thank you. Um, Jim, do you mind sharing a little bit about what you do to keep your brain active or take care of your well-being?
I I am active in various research projects. I think I'm involved in 5 or 6 right now. Um, and so that's a happy place for me. Um, I but I am so far relatively successful in not being in my office all day. I don't think that would be helpful to me and or to anyone else, to the project. So oftentimes we will I'll be here in the morning and then in the afternoon we'll go out somewhere, go shopping or something. And so that's a good day for me, and certainly by dinner time I'm tired, uh, usually more mentally tired. But then in the evening, you know, or I'll just listen to music, and um, I still get the newspapers, so I read the newspaper, both the Sun and the Globe and Mail in the morning, and so I do the Sudoku. Um, Mondays they're the easiest, and Saturday they're the hardest, and some days I can't do Tuesday, but yet I'll do Saturday. it really is amazing how that works, quite frankly. Um, but I think, that generally is um, keeps me keeps me active and happy. I don't read very much anymore. I don't think I have the patience for it. And I certainly at this point don't have the patience to listen to an audiobook. Um, I'm sure that will come, but not right now.
Thank you, Jim. And I know you've shared with me in the past that you feel more clarity in thought when you are engaged in a project and
Yeah,
when you have that purpose. I think that's key for many people is finding a way to have a role and to give
yeah.
back in a sense.
Well, my doctor used to say years and years ago, everyone needs a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And so I do have that. Um, but now the rest of what I was going to say has gone from me. I don't know what it was. So anyway, time to move on.
Okay, thank you so much, Jim. And Myrna, we'll end with you if you don't mind sharing some ways that you keep your brain active or take care of your well-being.
Very much like very much like the gentleman had to say, it wasn't until I discovered a purpose that I was able to live well with my dementia. And once people help me find that purpose, I am quite happy with my life. Of course, there's frustrations, but I am basically happy with my life. And to know that I can make that choice to put my happiness in my hands completely is such a huge lesson to learn. I have to share one thing, Kim. I'll be very, very brief. I went over to Gibson's a couple weeks ago as part of an education thing with University of BC. And as soon as we walked in, the hall was empty, but there was a little lady there, and she came up to me and she started hugging me, and she was crying and crying and crying. And she cried for about 20 minutes while we were trying to prepare for this meeting. I found out from her husband that she had been a nurse. I wanted to talk to her and help her feel more comfortable in the situation we were at. So I talked to her about the fact that she had been a nurse in an OR. Then the meeting began, and she sat at the table, and I was up doing the meeting, and I noticed that no one was talking to her at any degree. So when my portion was done and sat back down at the table, the people at the table were busy talking amongst themselves, and there was still no interaction with this particular lady. So I said, you guys know that Maya used to be a nurse in an OR? And they all went, oh, and this conversation began. So my most important thing to share with people today is find that topic, that interest in anybody with dementia, and it will grow from there. It gives the person purpose. It gives the person the right to share and be part of the community, and that's vital.
Thank you so much, Myrna. We all have strengths and gifts, right? And just finding that strength-based philosophy, I think, is so important when it comes to engaging with people. And sometimes it just people need that little bit of a push and to get the ball going. And so thank you for doing that. And that's a one way we can all be dementia friends in our own communities as well. If we see somebody who is not engaging in the conversation, is there a way that we can bring them into it? And yeah, so thank you. We have some time for questions. I will open it up if anyone would like to ask our guest speakers any questions. And people are typing. I will put out if there's any last thoughts that you would like to share with our audience today, please feel welcome to do so. So I've noted
I,
throughout the, sorry, go ahead,
no,
Jim.
I was going to say, I hope that this conversation that we've had has, I don't know, given people hope, opened up some possibilities for people and shown that um, there is a life after a diagnosis, um, uh, which which I believe is an important message for uh, for people, for those living with dementia or newly diagnosed with dementia, um, to hear that little tips that you have uh, asked of each of us, and how we might do our day, and how other people might well be able to pick and choose what that sounds like something I could do, or and so I'm hopeful that that people will have um, felt good after this meeting ends.
Thank you. That's a very important takeaway. So there are some questions, sort of general questions around how we can engage people living with dementia, um, maybe if they live alone, if they have not maybe accepted their diagnosis or are going through denial. How can we engage people in those situations? And also questions around if there's education and other social programs for people living with dementia. And I don't know if any of you would like to speak to some of the programs that you may have attended either through the Alzheimer's Society or in your community that you have found supportive. Myrna, go ahead.
Yeah, I briefly wanted to mention our group out in Maple Ridge. We actually play bocce a lot. We have Christmas in July at our city park. And this upcoming year will be our third annual celebration of people living with dementia. And let me further go to state that some of these people with dementia are nonverbal. Some cannot barely walk, and they just love coming out. What amazes me is I'm thinking of one gentleman who can barely walk, and boy, does he throw a mean bocce ball. Like it's just giving people the opportunity to take part in the activities they did before the diagnosis is so important. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I encourage people to look at what's available in their community. Through the Alzheimer's Society, we do have early stage support groups as well as support group for family caregivers. We have a program called Minds in Motion, which is a social group and a physical fitness group available in the community and online. There are also coffee and chat groups, which can help people connect and find social connections. So there are some programs, and there's wonderful education available as well through the Family Caregiver series or Shaping the Journey. And
I also find that, or have found in associating with this webinars and all of the activities around dementia, that there's a sense that that's communicated even in the sort of medical side that, this is there's no cure. This is it. It doesn't get any better than this. And I have to challenge that sort of, dim look, because I think, as Jim pointed out, and Myrna, if you come up with a purpose and something that the person is really, in my case as a caregiver, if I can help get that purpose in front of my wife, and I know she loves kids, and as long as she's around a kid, I might be worried about things, but she's just in her element. and do more of that, then it can be a very positive and a growing experience. For the caregiver, it's always going to be growing. I know for me that I'm going to learn a lot. So there's a positive there from the experience. But even for my wife, who's coping with her cognitive issues, then, you know, we can work on that. And I think that takes away this notion that it's all over, you know, you're done. It doesn't get any better. And I think we need to have that hope. And hope is what it's all about in terms of your happiness. You know, if you just have a little hope that there are going to be places here where we're going to learn things and improve our lives. And I think that's going to be important too. It is a long-term prospect for a lot of people, right? The caregiver as well as the person with cognitive issues. So we need to be able to be working on things that uplift us throughout this process.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you.
And that's a good, I think, point that Tobias made um, about learning. That yes, you know, caregivers will learn as they go along, but even people living with dementia still have that capability of learning. And so that gee, I'm sorry you have dementia, and goes along with the unsaid comment that they're keeping to themselves, that I guess you retire to your bedroom and that's it, or you stay in at home and don't do anything, don't socialize. And I always remember a woman a number of years ago who got a diagnosis and went home and shut the door. And at the time, she didn't even tell her daughter, but she did read about a volunteer with the picture and a little item about what the volunteer was doing, and she read that and thought to herself, well, if he can do it, so can I. And so she did start attending the support group. She did tell her daughter, and she did start going out. And it's and that's where I see the value of these webinars, that people do have the chance to hear from others, hear coping mechanisms, hear how they have a purpose in their life, and may feel that, you know, we can, yes, we can. So thank you. Thank you for having these webinars.
Thank you for being here today. And I think it's so important that people with lived experience share these insights and these firsthand experiences with others. And if not, just to get the conversation started and help point people in the right direction. We often don't have all the answers, but if we take one thing away, it can help, right? And even if it's just hope, that it doesn't mean that this is the end of a meaningful life. There is a question, and Myrna, I don't know if you have any strategies that you could recommend, but it's around someone who loves to cook, but is experiencing some changes, and cooking is challenging, yet they aren't always open to having support from a family member in the kitchen. Any ideas around how you might be able to engage somebody in cooking? That
Yeah, I think asking them to help you would be I think, a way around it, because if Dave assumes I can't do anything, then I'm going to become, I'm going to do it. I'm going to show you wrong. But if Dave came to me and said, Myrna, could you help me make this whatever? Tell me what to do. Then I think it would go much, much smoother. You know, bottom line, in everything in what we do, it's all about communication, isn't it? In everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that approach, I mean, it's not foolproof, but when you do ask for help and we are mindful that we're not highlighting where the person is struggling or what they can no longer do, but maybe go and say, hey, I've got a new recipe I'd love to try. I know you're such a great baker. Do you mind supporting me? And then you're doing it together and they're teaching you, even though you're supporting them in the kitchen. That can be, if they're open to it, but that can be a helpful strategy. Thank you, Myrna.
Mm-hmm.
A question around if medicine has been helpful. We know that, it can be quite individualized. We often recommend people get a diagnosis as early as possible so they can talk about their options with their doctor. And for some people, Alzheimer's medications can help slow the progression. Unfortunately, it won't stop it. I don't know if you have any comments on that. No. We do have a great resource online that will help determine if medication may be right for you. And there are also some webinars that have been recently done by our research team, which talks about what's coming up in the pharmaceutical realm.
Tim, I wonder if you could explain to our audience about that part of the dementia journey that some people go into where they don't believe they have dementia. I understand that it has a clinical descriptive name for that. Could you explain that to us, please?
I don't know if I know the descriptive name, the clinical name, sorry, Verna. But I do know that at some stage in the dementia journey that self-awareness is often, unfortunately, taken from people, and that includes the ability to understand that they've changed, that they're losing some of their abilities, and so at some point, often they will feel that other people in their life have the problem and they're managing fine and doing all of their routines the same way that they have been doing in the past. And that can create um, a source of frustration if the family are trying to correct and trying to reorientate and bring the person, back into their reality. And so we do have some great education sessions around what you can do at that point if the person no longer thinks that they have dementia or they've lost that understanding to know that something's wrong. Agnosia, thank you. I haven't been out of the education world a little bit and the terminology escapes me. So thank you so much. Yeah, I think we've covered many of the questions and I'm sorry if we haven't gotten quite to everyone's questions. I do encourage people to call the First Link Dementia Helpline. They are a wonderful resource and can provide a one-to-one support to you. And that brings us to the end. So I want to thank everyone so much for tuning in. And again, a special thank you to our guest presenters today, Myrna, Jim, and Tobias. Thank you so much for sharing with us.